There we go. So as of now, as of this moment, the recording is going to be posted on that website as well. So in terms of actually how to hear from you, since the majority of this is going to be discussion and us posing questions to you all, the way we'd prefer to do it is if you have a comment, questions, please put in the chat throughout. And I think Nakia is going to take the lead on moderating those and bringing them up as they come in. If you have a comment, please, or if you want to make a verbal comment, please just put your name or like, I want to make a comment in the chat. And then Nakia is going to call on folks one by one so that it's not, havoc. Okay, I think we can go on. Right, so the agenda for today, if you've been in the other sessions, you'll notice that, first we're going to, of course, introduce Virginia Energy and Virginia PACE Authority briefly, as well as their technical partners at Slipstream that are also partners in the statewide program. We're going to give a little bit more CPACE 101 than we have because we recognize that there are some folks that are very familiar with CPACE here, but we also have some folks who are a bit newer to the concept, which is really exciting for us. So welcome to the CPACE conversation, but we want to make sure that you have a foundational understanding of CPACE as a mechanism so that we can have a really robust conversation with you all as well. And then we're going to give an overview of kind of the status of the statewide program and the high-level legal parameters that we're working within as laid out in the state statute related to CPACE, talk a bit about the high-level role of local government in the general CPACE process. But of course, there are some nuances that we have to make decisions on. And so that's going to lead us into a discussion of some of those high priority topics, some of those decision points that we have ideas as to how we want to proceed on, but we really want your input before we finalize those decisions. We'll have some time for some additional questions that we have, as well as just questions that you have and a general open discussion before we give the brief next steps. All right, next. I think, okay, right. So in terms of Virginia Energy, kind of the very background to this whole conversation is that, of course, the Code of Virginia does authorize localities to enact CPACE ordinances and establish programs. You'll hear a little bit about that existing landscape of programs from Abby in a moment. And in 2020, the General Assembly authorized Virginia Energy to offer a statewide opt-in voluntary program for localities that wish to join it. And so a lot of last year in 2021 was spent going through a competitive procurement process, selecting, in which we selected Virginia PACE Authority with support from Slipstream to design and administer the program. Over to you, Nakia, I think, or no, Ellen, sorry.
Sure. So many of you are familiar with Virginia PACE Authority, and for those of you who are not, it was formed in 2019 by Abby Johnson. It's a not-for-profit that's been serving Virginia. The staff has about 9 years of experience running this program. Abby's also been in national program administrative, or all of us have some national program administrative and project expertise. And we provide outreach and education to localities, developers, capital providers, about the program, and it's been running since about 2015. Abby, for those of you who know her, she's been working in PACE around the country in other states like Pennsylvania, Texas, and Illinois, and she has also worked to expand the program to include resiliency. We also have Slipstream, who provides our technical support, and I can't really see if any of them are on the call, but I believe that they are. Holly and Holly's, there she is. I don't know if anyone else is from Slipstream is on the call, but they provide our administrative support, and they are in Wisconsin. And they also do Illinois and Oklahoma. So when projects go into our project center, Slipstream is the entity that handles those. And we currently, before the state program came on, we administered 9 localities under contracts that Abby has with those counties like Fairfax and Loudoun County. And so we'll see what happens as we move forward with the statewide program. And Abby also was able to get a RISE Challenge grant that has led to some development of some really interesting tools, innovative tools that can help project developers and localities figure out what different cost mechanisms could be. There's a development tool, and we also have developed a PACE-5, which is to help find financing for smaller projects.
Next slide, please. Thanks a lot, Ellen. That's for that introduction, and Bettina for hosting with us. I can see from the group that's on the Zoom that many of you have familiarity with PACE, but for those who do not, I will just give a quick overview of the program in general and what it is like in Virginia. So PACE basically, certainly is applicable to all sizes of buildings and properties and developments, but it certainly also can address some of the issues around social equity for projects that in affordable housing, for nonprofits and other kinds of community-based organizations. It's really growing rapidly throughout the country. It's actually more than 2.5 billion at this point in time. We're waiting for the updates from the National Trade Association, Peace Nation, for that update, but it's really growing very rapidly. As I think we have 38 states plus DC that are enabled. So that we're seeing this to be a trend, particularly as more and more community-based banks and other kinds of insurance companies are getting into the game. And this really leads us to believe that it's something that is going to be a really major economic development tool that we really hope also to employ in Virginia. And of course, most importantly, I think for many on the call, it is a way to finance, have a clean and more resilient building infrastructure, and we'll go into more detail about what that means in Virginia. So next slide, please. So basically, PACE stands for CPACE, Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing. This is basically a way for you to finance in very attractive terms energy improvements, clean energy improvements, resiliency improvements by placing a special assessment lien on your property. That as a private building owner asks local government to allow a special assessment lien on the property to be put in place. And for this, this is something that is a concept that's been around a long time. You see a lot of infrastructure. Think about, in your own cities and counties, streetlight upgrades or sewer upgrades, something that's been there. We're now basically allowing the private sector to take advantage of this, because the public benefit is in fact the fact that you're reducing the use of energy, fossil fuels. You're increasing the building's ability to withstand issues around climate change. For Virginia, and Bettina will go into this in a little more detail later, we do have a really, broad and expansive law, allows for new construction, existing buildings, and a wide range of different kinds of improvements. But because it is a special assessment, it does survive the sale. It's never accelerated. So if you have we call it a CPACE loan, that's actually per the statute, but if you have a CPACE loan, you have those payments, they get paid and enforced in a similar way to real property taxes. And thus, if a building is sold, the next property owner will continue to make those payments just like they would a real property tax, until which time the loan amount is paid off. So of course, real property taxes never go away. CPACE lien will. It also is senior, similar to real property taxes and other special assessment liens. It's senior to mortgages. So for that reason, you need to get the consent of existing mortgage holders. Now, what's important to note, very important to note, is that it's not the entire CPACE loan that's senior to the mortgage. It's just the payments. Just like, you have real property taxes, and those property taxes are senior, that amount due that year. So in any case, if there were an issue, it's only the past due amounts that would be actually senior to the mortgage. Next slide, please. So as I kind of alluded to before, you have private property owners asking a local government to place a special assessment lien on the property, and it's being funded by private capital providers. In Virginia, we are technically allowed to have public funding, but that's not something we've seen an appetite for. And nationally, that's, it's pretty much almost never happening at this point in time. It couldn't happen in the future, but there's no anticipation that local governments would provide any funding whatsoever. In fact, they're indemnified also in terms of liability from any issues regarding repayment. So it's private money going to private capital, private building owners and developers using a special assessment lien structure or mechanism. And this does make it a public-private partnership because from the side of the private, you're getting attractive financing to install clean energy improvements. From the public side, you're getting a new economic development tool that costs nothing to local governments, particularly now that we're going to have it offered at the state. And also it allows you to fulfill your clean energy resilient goals in a way that is something attractive to the private sector. So you can focus on the public sector infrastructure. Next slide, please. So basically, there's many benefits of CPACE. I wanted to kind of just briefly go over from different perspectives. So certainly, the client and you have different clients, but the client in terms of providing, getting the loan is the property owner or the developer. And the reason why they would want to do it are many, many reasons. Certainly, I would say the biggest one is that it provides 100% financing of a retrofit project and a portion of a new construction project. So in the case of a retrofit, you have old HVAC equipment, old lighting, and you don't want to take it out of your CapEx budget, your capital improvement budget. You can use PACE to pay for it up front, and then you will pay for it over time, similar to a long-term loan, but you didn't have to put anything up front. And most, pretty much every commercial loan at this point in time, you have to put up some money, your own cash, your own equity to pay for the project. And a new construction project, which I'll go into a little more in detail later, you can't use the whole thing for PACE, but you can use 20-25% of the construction budget can be PACEable, as we call it, can use the PACE financing if in fact these measures are showing that they are clearly energy efficient and resilient. Also, long-term loans. Right now, most programs are allowing up to 30 years. We don't have any statutory limitations on how long the term can go. Generally, we'd say you certainly want it to be based on, the estimated useful life of the improvements. You certainly don't want to put a 50-year PACE loan on when you only have lighting, which has got maybe 15-year life. So we certainly are cognizant of that, and that will open that up to discussion later on about limitations that you as local government officials and consultants might see as important. Most localities currently allow maximum 30 years or the weighted average of the improvements, whichever is less. Most localities, a few more. A few are less than that, but generally the trend is 30 years. The interest rates are typically fixed. There are some banks that offer adjustable rates where they're fixed and then they readjust after 5 or 10 years. This is something that we're certainly open to, meaning that the rates are usually lower up front because you have that adjustment period. But the trend nationally for the larger capital providers is to provide fixed for the entire term. It's non-recourse because it is property-based financing. It's basically the PACE lender, their collateral is the building, and the value of the building is how they base their loan amount. It's less to do with the borrower's financial wherewithal, which is why it's great for nonprofits, for those who don't have huge balance sheet. Certainly, it's not completely ignored. You have to be current on your taxes. You can't be in bankruptcy, things like that. But it is helpful from that perspective to addressing some of the properties you may have in your localities that really need the most help. And there's other benefits here. I won't go into great detail, but it is important to note that, and you can have both landlords and tenants benefit. Next slide, please. So I think for this audience, I think it's important to really point out the benefits for local governments. And for local governments, call it the community, it certainly is a way to, another tool to help meet the environmental goals you may have in your locality. If your goals are, primarily economic development, you're basically helping the private sector or businesses be able to use PACE financing to reduce the cost of their investment up front and to have a more energy efficient building. So you can lower operating costs as well as reduce the upfront costs of developing a building or retrofitting a building. Certainly, we've seen in the very first slide, we point out later as well, that it does create jobs, both for the construction industry and also for service providers, because there is a component where you need to have an energy analysis or project survey for resiliency done to show that it actually complies with the program. Certainly, it's something that we're seeing with the addition of resiliency in our state statute, that this can really help address the issues that we have in many of our communities around rising sea levels, riverine flooding, wind issues, issues with even fires and heat. So it's something we see as a really tool that we think you will find really valuable. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, there is no financial burden, and the liability is clearly on the property owner in terms of their rights and responsibilities. So just quickly, and I wanted to bring up a few of the ownership types that are eligible. Everything but single family residential 1 to 4 units is able to use CPACE. There was some discussion this year on allowing residential PACE in Virginia. We're not there yet. There's more work to be done. Also, we're waiting for some, feedback from the federal government on how to address residential PACE. But commercial PACE has been around for a number of years, and it's been, we've expanded it over a number of years to make it more beneficial for all stakeholders involved. We also see that we think that the agricultural sector, industrial sector are something that could be a benefit to many of our more rural communities, and I think that's something that we're seeing used more and more in PACE. Next slide, please. I think we didn't get the slide on. We'll just quickly look at the slide that showed the property type so you can see it, and then we'll move to the next slide on eligible improvements. So mentioned it briefly before, basically if you can show that you have a piece of equipment that is more efficient than what you had before in an case of an existing building, or that it is exceeding the code, we're generally allowing to be eligible. We are refining exactly those kind of points through the statewide process. But to date, that's how this program has functioned, as do many around the country. We're really looking to encourage energy efficiency, but at the same time recognizing the need for property owners to be able to make good choices that make for both environmental and financial sense. So pretty much anything is energy efficient, anything that's related to renewable energy, water conservation, stormwater management, and now also resiliency. Next slide. So this is a quick example of a project in just to our north in Maryland, and it's basically showing kind of how you would use it in a retrofit scenario. In this case, this is a nonprofit that provided services for individuals in the community, including actually kind of a residential component to their facility. And basically what it allowed them to do is for them to use their cash for their operations and to basically upgrade their facility with new HVAC and lighting and other things through PACE. And because they got a long-term loan, in this particular county, the maximum term is 20 years, but still, that's something that's really hard to get in a traditional bank scenario. So we also, any bankers on the phone, we do encourage banks to participate as CPACE lenders. There's certainly no limitation to that. In fact, we encourage that. We think that they can really offer a very good product for their clients. And I also mentioned earlier, but basically there are ways, if you do have a tenant, in this case, you can pass through the expenses of PACE because it's considered one of the operating expenses. It's one of the taxes that you may have that typically in many lease scenarios you would pay for. Next slide, please. This is an example, again, just to our north in Anne Arundel County, of a hotel being built and use PACE for part of its construction project for its energy efficient buildings, windows, for some of the HVAC, and other envelope measures. And what was great about this, and why I think you might see how this could be beneficial to a lot of the developers you're seeing, any kind of developer, those who do ground up construction, those who do tax credit projects, gut rehabs, PACE can apply to all different sectors of developments. And basically what it allowed this developer to do is to reduce the equity he had to put into the project because PACE provided 100% of that component of the project budget. And so as a result, he was able to make the numbers pencil. And that also helped, from them look at the county, in this case, in very positive light, because the county was able to offer a program that really made it more attractive to invest in that community. And in addition, I would point out, and not to get into too much of the weeds in this conversation, but basically, because you are generally paying it back in a similar way to real property taxes, you're going to be paying it back twice a year. And depending on when you're finishing construction, many PACE lenders will allow you to push out that repayment date so that you can maybe, basically defer payments for even, 2 to 3 years, depending on construction and the terms of the financing agreement with your PACE lender. And so that can also help make sure that the project cash flows. Next slide, please. So just really quickly, I want to point out a few statistics about what's going on right now in our program. We anticipate these numbers to grow significantly as the statewide program rolls out this year. Currently in our existing program, we have about 40 million in our pipeline. There's a few really small projects and there's some really large ones that basically consist of this 40 million, but there are all different kinds of property types, from hotels to greenhouses to retail to multifamily. We have already 22 capital providers registered in the VPA program. We're excited, to have more and more join as part of the Virginia Energy VPA state program. And we also have a really good wide variety of contractors and service providers, and looking, of course, to always increase those and to meet the needs of our program. Next slide, please. So another quick snapshot, basically 16 localities have adopted a PACE ordinance to date. And of those, 10 are either fully open or they have soft opens. And they primarily are in the Northern Virginia area, as well as in Norfolk, and Virginia Beach is shortly going to be open as well as a few localities in Central Virginia. So we really talk to many more localities about PACE than those that are actually open. So we really are excited you're on the phone and looking forward to you all opting in to the statewide program when it becomes available. Next slide. Tina, back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I did put in the chat, just since this is a lot of information for someone who's less familiar, generally, if there were any questions. And I see that we do have one from Tom. I think maybe might as well address that. Actually, we have 2 questions. Nikia, do you mind moderating that before we move ahead?
Of course. Excuse me. Alrighty, first question is from Tom O'Grady. He says, can you please expand on flood mitigation with further examples? Build new SWM pond with new commercial construction, retrofit existing SWM pond. Would a regional SWM pond be eligible if it served multiple commercial properties?
You want me to grab that one, Martina?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tom, and nice to see you. Glad you joined from the city of Hampton. So these are very good questions. We had a technical session last week where we delved into this to some degree, and we are going to be expanding how we're going to address eligibility of stormwater management systems. And but yes, generally, yes, we are anticipating that you could certainly finance a part of the pond, maybe all of it in new construction. That's some of what we have to kind of figure out, because it is a new part of PACE. So, certainly if you're, we want to make sure that as a project whole, it makes sense. But yes, we think that if you can retrofit it and you can show that you're going to be reducing runoff, in either scenario, and maybe even mean code for new construction is something we would take under consideration. But that's something we will definitely want to talk to you more about, and other those who are really involved in stormwater management, to figure out the best balance between just allowing everything in and potentially not being too exclusionary. But yes, that is the intent, to allow for those kind of measures to be included. And the last question, that the regional stormwater management pond be eligible if it served multiple commercial properties, if depends on where the parcel lies, and that's something that we could probably address, but could require multiple consents on the different properties. So that's something we can't really address this call, but since we know each other, I'm happy to discuss later, and we can also make it publicly available. And to Victoria's question, I'll just go ahead and do that in interest of time. She wants to know what soft opening means, and basically what that means is that some cities and counties have not fully opened yet. They're pretty new, like Louisa County and City of Roanoke. But we are accepting applications currently in those, because we know that they passed the ordinance. They've already contracted with the Virginia PACE Authority so that we can make it happen if we have to. In many instances, I've already spoken to representatives in those localities where we're really hoping just to opt into the state program versus, continuing as a local government option.
Thank you. Super efficient. So hopefully that was helpful. And Tom, as Abby said, we'll certainly be in touch. Based on your questions, we think you can provide us with some answers as well. All right. So regarding the statewide program and kind of where we're at right now, I'll start maybe more at the bottom bullet of this slide. As you heard, there are a number of existing local programs right now. And so those can remain operational as local programs, into the future, or they can transition over to the statewide program. Because the statewide program is an opt-in, voluntary option that is meant just to make it easier for both localities, especially those that don't have programs yet, as well as make things more standardized and easy for market participants, such as capital providers and property owners and developers. So, the good thing with having these local programs already, and the whole VPA and Slipstream team's involvement in CPACE for many years across the country, is that we are really not starting from scratch as we put together this statewide program. And we get some questions, of what really is the statewide program. And the answer is that it's really a set of documents at the end of the day, legal documents, the most important ones being the local ordinance that is passed, the program agreement, which is a contract template for all the loans that are approved through the program, as well as even more specific documents like managing recording, the recording process. And then the key technical guide that we really discussed a lot in last week's technical workshop is this program guide. That's going to have all of those specific definitions of what is resiliency, what is eligible, and really specifically what the process is. So that's what we're going to be finalizing. But again, templates of all of these exist and have been iterated on over time. So we're starting from a really good place. And then we're going to have centralized marketing and outreach as well, which again, I think will just be nice for local government participants, as well as for all of the private sector market participants. In terms of the actual opt-in mechanics, this is something that, of course, is going to be new for the statewide program. And what we are thinking right now is that there will be a clause in the local ordinance template that authorizes the locality to opt in to the statewide program per a separate agreement with Virginia Energy. And then we'll have a separate agreement that is under draft right now that the locality and Virginia Energy sign, which lays out all of the responsibilities on either side and designates, a designee that can fulfill the responsibilities or some of the responsibilities of Virginia Energy. And of course, that would be the program administrator. I think go to the next, unless there's questions about that. And this extra slide is just to reinforce kind of from the Virginia perspective, that powerful economic case for CPACE that Abby mentioned. There's a new really nice report from the group PACE Nation that outlines what those benefits are. And even on a state by state level. So here, I'm not going to read them out, but you can see that quite a lot of jobs and economic impact, in addition to reduced greenhouse gas emissions, can be achieved with the widespread use of CPACE. And we really think that this statewide program is going to help do so. Let's see, I'm seeing Jake's question. When is the draft agreement for locality opt-in expected to be ready? Hopefully soon after this call. Again, we're using these workshops to inform the near final version of all of the program documents. And so I would say, I think we told Richmond, some folks in Richmond yesterday that was going to be early February. So Abby, do you know Jake? I don't know Jake.
Yeah, I think, is this from Chesapeake? I mean, from not Chesapeake, from Chesterfield? Which Jake? I'm trying to see where the
Yes,
Jake.
Chesterfield.
Hey, hi, nice to talk to you again.
Yeah.
I think the goal is sometime in February. We're working with an attorney, so I do have to defer to his schedule. But yes, soon, very soon, and we're certainly open to having you give input to that as well.
Yes, definitely. Definitely going to be looking, not only to get initial input in this conversation, but also then send out those draft template documents, if not to everyone, then to folks that we know are willing to take a look, just so that we know that everything's all good. And I see that Nakia responded to Alicia's question.
Yeah, I can also answer some of these in the chat if you want to keep going. I just was thinking about time too for that.
Yes, thank you. Why don't we see what the next slide is? Yes. Okay, so the next couple of slides are just on the CPACE statute in Virginia in the code. And this information was included, the whole statute was included in that box folder of materials that we sent you, as well as summarized in the background document. So maybe this is not new information at this point, but it is really important because, as we said, we do have some basic legal parameters that we are working within, that we can't not comply with, but we do have some decisions that we make within those broad legal parameters. So I think we've actually mentioned a lot of what's in here. For example, that existing buildings as well as new construction are eligible. Commercial property types are eligible, including multifamily of over 5 units. The code does give kind of that broad project eligibility, but as we said, we need really specific definitions for those things. And so those are going to be provided in the program guide. Virginia has to be open market, so a property owner can work with any capital provider of their choice. Let's go to the next slide, and I'll just point out a couple things that are important to this conversation. Let's see, lender consent is required, as in most places. A CPACE lien may be enforceable by the locality in the same manner as a property tax lien. That is something that we're going to come back to as an important item of discussion. And in case it's not clear yet, an enabling ordinance does need to be passed by the locality in order to enable CPACE. And that ordinance must include a draft contract. So that draft program agreement that we mentioned. And those are things that, again, are going to be drafted with templates through the statewide program. So I think, Abby, over to you to kick us off in the discussion section. And I will.
Sure. Do you want me to do this slide, or do you want to do this one on the process?
You go ahead and I'll take a look at the chat.
Okay, perfect. So basically, this is a rather simplified kind of diagram on the steps for local governments to become part of the program. Basically, you do need to pass an ordinance regardless of the state program. And we're going to be, as Bettina mentioned, we'll be providing a template for that, as well as a template program agreement. This is for the state statute requires this. One, do you opt into the program by signing an agreement with Virginia Energy? And we currently have the contract with Virginia Energy to provide the program administrative services for PACE financing in Virginia. So we would be working with you very closely. We, of course, like we're doing now locally, but even to a greater degree, because it's the state, would be doing the heavy lifting on the marketing. That doesn't mean we wouldn't, be more than happy to engage with your economic development departments or resiliency or sustainability departments to, coordinate or make sure that folks in your locality know about it. If you have property owners who are interested in using PACE in your locality, we certainly welcome the opportunity to help them. So it's not like we don't want you as partners. We're just saying that we're going to be doing that work. That's our job. And we are actually paid through fees that close transactions. So we're asking for nothing from from the local government. We do take-in applications, which is through our partner Slipstream, and we process them, we approve them, and then we facilitate the closing of the loan in conjunction with the local government and with the capital provider. We will be talking about some issues around that could even further facilitate interest into the statewide program. Basically, and then once the loan is approved, the funding is provided, it is then recorded either by us or the capital provider typically into the land records. And then after the property uses the money to do the upgrade or help build a new building, later on when the repayment schedule, as I mentioned earlier, comes into effect based in some degree between the agreement between the capital provider and the borrower, then the property owner will repay that amount either through us, or the local government, or through the capital provider. It's something also to discuss, but generally we're seeing in Virginia that the direct billing is something that's an option in Virginia and something that being taken advantage of to, again, reduce the burden to local governments. That is the key for us. It's just to be an economic development tool for you all, not an economic or administrative burden. Next slide. So we basically wanted to talk about some high priority topics. I'm already looking at the time here, and I'm sure we're probably going to go over. And so I just want you to know that even though we just have this one meeting today, it doesn't mean we're not going to continue the conversation, answer questions, and so it's not like a one time that's it. But we definitely want to get some initial feedback to inform our the program guide and the process we already have. So we already have a process we've already vetted through existing local government partners, through existing knowledge and experience in the larger, broader market throughout the country. But we're Virginia, and we want to make sure Virginia localities are feel involved and feel heard in how we develop the program. So the first topic is just the general amount of involvement, and that kind of centers around three different areas. Balancing, not having the burden of doing anything necessarily, a heavy lift, and in terms of how much you want to get out of it, how much you want to be involved. Some localities want to be more part of it or have the capacity in terms of staff to be more involved and help, which is great for everyone involved. Those that don't, we're not asking for it. So that's one kind of topic to think about. Also, the loan approval process. And just like how much you want to be involved versus not. Currently, there's a local government official who needs to approve the loan. Now we do the lifting, we say, here it is, we provide all the documentation that's required to have the CPACE financing be approved, provide that to the local government point of contact who's been designated, and they approve it. So it doesn't mean you have to sit there and review everything there, but there is, of course, a timing that occurs with that, and also time for that point of contact to do that work. And also we want to talk about reporting. What would you like to get out of it? What kind of metrics would be helpful? So to go to our first set of questions, the first question is, if you are already PACE enabled, what issues have you encountered using PACE, or do you see any issues, frankly? Are there any things you would prefer to have clarified that have not in our current guide that would, inform the statewide program. So I'm just going to stop there and open it up for any comments on that first question.
And I think that that question is on the next slide, right? There we go.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought she had seen that I had moved forward. Okay. Yeah. And sometimes there's a lag with our internet. Sorry about that, folks. So the first question again, if you already are enabled, are you seeing any issues with the way it's structured and anything you can want to change? It's a big question. So if you don't feel like answering now, you can certainly send us an email, but I'll just leave it open for a second for anyone to respond to that. Okay, I'm gonna start doing a countdown now so we can get through these questions. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, going once, going twice. Next question. If your locality has not enabled CPACE, and I'm not really referring to like Wise County, which just passed their ordinance, or Virginia Beach, which is in the process of getting their documentation together, but those that are like a little farther behind the process. Can you talk about any issues, why you haven't done it, and what would encourage you to become part of the statewide program?
Hi, this is Stephanie Kupka from the City of Fairfax.
Hey, how are you?
Good, doing great. So the City of Fairfax has considered adopting a CPACE program. However, we just don't have staff capacity to do it internally. So that's why we're really excited for the statewide program to help lift that capacity issue. So that way we can work with the state on that to help reduce our workload. So I guess that was the main thing holding us back, is just staff capacity.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's great to hear. Of course, we want you part of our program. You're kind of surrounded by Fairfax. So sometimes we've definitely had property owners and capital providers have projects in the city. So I'm very happy that this is going to make the difference for you.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else?
Hey, this is Jake Elder with Chesterfield Economic Development again, and just to echo that was the main reason Chesterfield was holding out, was just the staff limitations of not having a designated person to run this program, and we already know we have project interest in this program, so really excited to see the statewide program available.
Thank you, Jake. That's really good to hear. If I don't see anyone unmuting, I'm going to move to the next question.
Abby.
Oh, is there one more?
Oh, there was just a comment from Anna Benson.
Oh, hi, Anna.
Yeah, she's just in agreement. She said, same in Lynchburg, we have passed an ordinance, but have limited capacity to administer and not a current project driving us forward at the time, which we do get a lot.
Right. I'm aware, I think, of that project and how it came and went, but I'm hoping, Anna, that this will make the difference in terms of joining, because I do think Lynchburg is a market that, I've heard is something that people want to develop in. So
yeah, thanks, Abby. We're really excited about this this program. I think it's going to be really good for us to be able to do this.
Thank you. So I'm looking forward to working with you again. So that's great to hear. Anyone else? Just have any general comments about the state program or interest? All right, I'll move to the next question. Are there any other tools that you can think of that would help increase the use of or encourage adoption of PACE? We did mention a few tools that we're going to have embedded in our website, our developer kind of modeling tool. We have PACE 5, but is there something else that you can think of that would really make a difference in your locality?
This is Bill Egger with the City of Alexandria. I don't necessarily have a tool, but I do believe we have to amplify marketing and outreach across our commercial property partners, as well as the workforce, contracting community. I think that's a limitation here in Alexandria specifically, but I imagine that conveys to the rest of the Commonwealth as well. So I think anything we can do to come together on broader and aggressive marketing campaigns will be beneficial.
Thanks, Bill. Absolutely. I think, you invited us to come and speak in front of a committee for NAIOP, which is a real estate organization. I think absolutely those particularly real estate organizations that have membership that are, developers or property owners. It's a really key. So appreciate that.
This is Stephanie Kupka again. I totally agree with Bill. One thing that might be useful, could we get like a toolkit, like a marketing toolkit, so that way it makes it easier for localities to help market PACE?
Yeah, and we actually have a lot of those elements of a toolkit that aren't on our website, but what I think you're saying, which we're definitely going to, write down and take to heart, is that it'd be something that from the state we can provide, like, here's the state program, here's what, is included. And then, if you want something specific to your locality, then we can discuss it. But I think having the state kind of seal of approval will, as a toolkit, I'm hoping will really increase interest. Is that what you were kind of meaning, Stephanie? Something like that? Like with like fact sheets and, example case studies, things like that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, maybe an
Presentations,
example.
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Like example presentations that we could bring to our council, that kind of thing.
Absolutely, yes. We absolutely have many of those. So happy to do that. Thank you for those comments. Anyone else on that question? Anyone we haven't heard from? Also thinking about, I don't want to pick anyone, but I could pick Mackenzie, for example, who I met, if she feels like saying something. If you don't, that's fine.
Hi, Abby, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I don't have any questions at this time, but I think you guys are doing a great job, and thanks for taking time to clarify a lot of these concerns that the local government does have.
Thank you. And we're excited that Fredericksburg, they have adopted an ordinance and are kind of one of the soft open cities, but I think we've discussed the value of opting into the state. So thank you for being on. I appreciate that. So the next question I think is a little more meaty, unless I see any more unmutes, and that is, one thing I kind of alluded to before is right now there's a local government official who actually has to approve the loan. It's, again, we're doing all the work to get it to the point of approval, but that does still require a local government staff person to be have that role. So is there an opinion about whether you would like to maintain that role internally, or would you be comfortable with having that assigned to the state program?
Abby, this is Brian Phelan from Wise County. I guess just one kind of point of clarification there is, and this may be preliminary to ask this question, but if a locality opts into the state program, are the loans going to be required to be approved by either Virginia Energy or VPA also? I'm just thinking that it could eliminate a step if it has to be approved at the local level and by Virginia Energy or VPA. I guess it would make sense to delegate that to Virginia Energy and VPA. Is just my thinking there. I don't know that our locality would have any issues with that at all, considering it is going to be a statewide program to kind of give that, for those agencies to kind of give that final approval.
Okay, that's great to know. Yeah, we would do it either way, but yes, that would eliminate you wouldn't have to do it at the local level. Thank you for that comment. Anyone else have any comments about that? Thinking about maybe some of our existing localities too.
This is Bill Egger, City of Alexandria. I would say that we appreciate a potential opportunity to partner with Virginia Energy and VPA, where we have minimal touch on the program as we've been elected to have as of current, which Abby and others know. I would say that we would still want to have some authority over approval, particularly as we're conveying lien on a property. I think that just has future implications if we don't. So I would caution against having complete absence of the locality's involvement in an approval process, but I do believe that it should be something minimal. I think that's open to discussion of what that looks like.
Thanks, Bill. It's a very good point and kind of a lead to our next set of questions and shortly, so I'll hold off on that. I'm looking at the test. Let's see who else is that I know. I think, actually, Alicia and we talked yesterday in the city of Richmond about that. I don't know. Do you have anything, or Donnie? Do either of you have anything you want to add to that, or Dawn? The three of you about that from the city's perspective, city of Richmond.
This is Alicia. I think we're kind of along the same lines as Bill just shared from Alexandria. And we also wanted to check internally with our other folks that'll be our stakeholders. So we probably don't have a final answer at this point, but similar along the lines of Alexandria.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate that. Any more comments about?
And I would agree. This is Anna in Lynchburg, with both of those, that we want to be hands off on the administration, but I think that there does need to be some, not completely out of the loop when it comes to the development project. Like we need to be in the conversation in some way with the developer. I wouldn't want them to just completely go around and us not really know, kind of what was going on. So how we build that into the program guidelines, I think it can be minimal, but should be there.
Okay, great to know. I appreciate that. Again, it's not like we're trying to take it away. It's definitely,
of course not.
Yeah. What you all do and do not want to do. And I think I would add that, for the fifth question, what kind of reporting or metrics you want to have, in addition to just things you can certainly disseminate from the perspective of economic development or clean energy, also would be, what do the loans look like? Have they been repaid on time? Is there any issues? So I think certainly that's anticipated we would include that kind of data. But I do want to ask the question if there's anything specific that you would like to see from the state program in terms of metrics from the loans that are, in your program and other localities, frankly.
Hey, Abby, before we go to that, and I don't want to put you on the spot here because I know we have lots of brainstorming to do and follow-up conversations to have, but just based on what we heard just now in response to question 4, I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts based on experience in Virginia and nationally on kind of that compromise between full approval and administrative burden on the locality versus not being involved at all. Do you have kind of an idea as to how that light touch can be still involved from the local level?
Yeah, I would say, and very, very good follow-up question. And I'm happy to be, and after I say something, Holly's going to say something. I see her in there, which I want her to, because she's our partner.
Oh, perfect. Yes.
Yeah. I would say that there's usually a local government touch. It can be various levels, but I do not know of a state program where maybe Connecticut at some point, it was almost hands-off because it was a green bank that was, but even there's some level of approval. So I think maybe a good point is to kind of dig into a higher and lighter touch from other places to really understand where we want to land in Virginia. But I don't think I don't know anywhere. I just want to ask that question. If it were possible, would you want it? But I don't think it's there yet. So Holly, what do you want to say to that?
Well, I just want to make 2 points. One is that I work to support the Virginia program, with the application process and the reviews and things like that. And then we also run the program in Wisconsin, which has been up and running for a number of years. And we do some program work in Illinois. And so I just wanted to share 2 things kind of from that perspective. One is that I'm really glad to hear the consensus a little bit from the various municipalities or jurisdictions that are on the call, because one thing we definitely like to see in Wisconsin and I think helps a market grow is a consistent program, so that the set of rules for a borrower or a lender are the same whether they're working in Lynchburg or Alexandria, because we see a lot of repeat customers with the lending community. So I'm glad to hear that kind of consensus. For the approvals, that also goes to this repeat customer. Once one lender does a project in one area in Virginia, they're going to find a way to do other projects, and which is great. And having a consistency in the timing and the process is very helpful. What we've done for the city of Milwaukee, they have a separate set of guidelines from the rest of Wisconsin. And for the city of Milwaukee, what we've done is we kind of review the applications against the guidelines that are established. When all the requirements are met, we issue an approval letter to the city. The city reviews the basics of the project and then they sign off on that approval letter. That gives us the clearance to take the next steps to to start developing the contracts and the closing documents. So, to your point, they're in the loop. They know about the project. We even keep them posted like monthly about what's in the works. So that's kind of a process we're using for City of Milwaukee. There's definitely our approval, their recognition of the approval, and then it moves to the contract phase. But having that consistency across jurisdictions, I think, would be really helpful. So, thanks.
Holly, do you see, but in other localities in Wisconsin, do you see a lighter touch desired from the local government perspective, or the same as Milwaukee?
Yeah, so the rest of Wisconsin is set up through a joint powers agreement. So all the participating jurisdictions sign an agreement that says they are going to be part of this JPA commission, and the commission does the approvals. They vote on the projects. So a jurisdiction can appoint someone to that commission, or they don't have to. We have some jurisdictions that don't have anybody on the commission, but the authority is delegated to a commission that is set up through a joint powers agreement, which is, I think, might be something similar in other states for JPAs and commissions and setting up authorities, but it's an extra step, but it does kind of defer or delegate the power to that commission.
So that's, I guess, part of the kind of nut of the conversation is whether or not that kind of power or that delegation would be housed in a state program, and whether or not a department of the state government has the same kind of JPA or authority, to requires authority or not. If that's something that we even want. So I see lots of calls coming in.
Yeah, it's very specific in the joint powers agreement that, and I think Bill might have brought this up, that it is the local government that is kind of signing off on the lien and taking on the obligation in a way. So there needs to be a formal delegation, I think, of that power.
Who enforces? I know I'm probably going to move to the next question, but who enforces the lien in Wisconsin? Is it still a local government that does it, or
it is? It reverts back if a lien goes delinquent. Now we're up to 65 projects, $100 million, and we haven't had any, so knock on wood for sure. But yeah, it would revert back to the jurisdiction in which the lien is recorded.
Thanks for that. Let's just move to question 5. By the way, just so you know, we do have some extra questions. If we don't get to them all, we will follow up, maybe have maybe even a second short session, and or have a way for you all to comment on those additional questions, because they're more specific than these. Any metrics that you all want? Thank you, Holly, for that insight, by the way. That was very valuable. Any other metrics that you all particularly would want to see, or would you want to leave it kind of to the state to come up with a range of things that we would then provide out? We can certainly, it's not going to, PACE is not a like residential PACE. Many loans happen every month. And commercial, they've done, Wisconsin's example, it's a little smaller than Virginia, but they've done 65 projects over how many, 7 years, I think, something like that. Holly? 6, 7, something like
I'm
that.
sorry, what?
How many years has Wisconsin been open? Like 7?
How many years? Yeah, so 2016.
Oh, really? Okay, so more like 5.5. So, that's really good program, and I think we can, even because we're a larger state, exceed that. But it's not like you're going to get like 5 loans a week. So the reporting will not be,
no, right,
local,
right. Even in our most active county, Dane County, they're probably getting. This year is a very busy year, and they probably had 4 projects come on board in Dane County, and that's probably our busiest county, where Madison is. So, yeah, it's not like we're adding liens to 1,000 properties, right? It's still a very niche market of what commercial buildings are large enough and have projects big enough to actually have this make sense. So it's not huge.
Yeah, but of course we hope it to grow. So we certainly, right?
Yeah, and it can be really impactful properties. I mean, yeah, it's only a handful, but when it is the former Oscar Myers headquarters facility, which is 3 acres and 6 office buildings that are empty, and now there's a reuse plan and a redevelopment plan. Yeah, it's one project, but it's a very important project, and it was a $7 million PACE loan. So.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. We have up to, I mean, the largest project is of course in New York City, makes sense. It's about 90 million, but we definitely are seeing larger projects. And we're seeing that, we're going to be engaging with all the different economic, groups and real estate groups. So we want to make this a program that certainly has volume. We're just pointing out that it's not like we can't provide kind of, localized metrics for you if you need them at this point in time. It's not, we'll have that information already because we'll know where the loan is housed.
Yeah, Abby, I think on this question, unless actually Jake said capital investment for per project would be something he would add to the list. So that's super helpful. Please, others, add more if you think of them. But it sounds like maybe there aren't, a ton of ideas right now. And what we'll do based on Alicia's good suggestion is look at, Wisconsin as well as other programs, state programs, and see what they're tracking. And then also think about, from it and balancing administrative burden versus with usefulness of that reported information. Why don't we, I think we should go to the next topic, but Abby, I think Anna's question is important to address before we go to enforcement, if you can take that one.
Yeah, I can see that. So basically, the ordinance that we're going to be developing is going to look a lot like the ordinances that those that have enabled it have seen, but there are going to be a few changes, and they will have the most updated information from the state statute, some of which is important, like refinancing. We have refinancing in Virginia where, 2 years from the date of application, from when you got your certificate of occupancy or you place in service your equipment, you can refinance. So if you have a property that say in your locality that closed a year ago, that developer, if they need the cash or they want to use PACE, can. And that's something that was not available, I believe, when Lynchburg, for example, passed their ordinance. So I do think that although we could think about allowing you to opt in with your existing ordinance, I don't think in most cases we're going to recommend it because you're going to miss out on some of the great changes we're making and have been made to the state statute. So we can talk about that more later, but I would just really point out the value of having all the things that we're clarifying, even if we, knock on wood, get things through the session, not for sure by any case, but if we do, it'll even broaden potentially the ability for more kinds of property owners to use PACE. So I'm happy to discuss offline, Anna. So moving on to the next topic. This is something where we wanted to talk about enforcement. So this is a big issue that it's been around nationally, and it's something that worries local governments, understandably, the idea that that they are responsible, even if not financially responsible, that they would be asked, because it's a special assessment lien, to enforce the PACE payment, delinquent payments, if they were unpaid and if the capital provider asked for that. This is kind of how traditionally PACEs work. That is where, in most cases, still enforcement is agreed to by the local government. It's something that is in most of the local ordinances that we have, that option and willingness to do it. Some say shall, some say may. It's a very, as Holly even alluded to, never happened in her program. I would say there's only a handful of cases at the most nationwide over the last 9 or 10 years in commercial PACE. So it's something that's usually resolved before it ever gets to that point. But that being said, there are some discussions like where capital providers, the PACE lenders, who traditionally like that enforcement provision because they can then take loans, do a bunch of loans in a bunch of states, and then they can bundle them and sell them in different ways on the secondary market or to an individual investor. And so that enforcement provision, the ability to make sure that lien does not go away, is not extinguished, so to speak, is important. That being said, if there were clarity that the capital provider could foreclose and had all the rights and the abilities to do so in the same manner as the local government would, and assign that right to them, then that's something that is becoming more acceptable for some PACE lenders. And that would open up at least an option for local governments to agree to enforce, but some may say, I have absolutely, we don't know what's going to happen at our local level. Our treasurer isn't in favor of PACE. We can't do it. So it's an issue that we're still discussing. It's something that we're trying to clarify in our state statute this year. It's something we have an attorney general opinion of, but attorney general opinions that say they allow for the direct billing, collection, and enforcement of PACE loans by capital providers is an attorney general opinion. It's not in the statute. So therefore, it's not quite as strong, frankly. I'm not an attorney, but I mean, that's certainly the opinion I've gotten. So let's go to our questions. And I know this could take up, frankly, the rest of the time. But again, as I said, we will figure out a way to ask the other questions another time or have potentially another session if that's something we think is warranted. So the first question is, and if we're on the questions here, do any of you have an opinion whether or not localities should be the ones responsible solely for enforcement?
This is Bill Egger. I would say that in Alexandria's perspective, we do not have interest in enforcement. I think Abby knows that fairly certainly.
I do.
And so, yeah, I think we're indifferent to whether other localities, want to retain that right, but I would assume that there are a number who have no interest in performing that function.
Thanks, Bill. Anyone else? And again, if you don't have an opinion yet, as we get more information, out there, certainly welcome in the future to have comments. I would say that, per our previous slide, clarity of how it works is just primarily as important as who does it. So I think in some of the ordinances we have currently, that clarity has not been enough to make capital providers comfortable if the enforcement hasn't been an option. So that's just something to keep in mind. So I don't see.
Hey, Abby.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, there is something in the chat maybe. I was just thinking for folks who might be newer to thinking through this question, if you've heard any kind of pros and cons from localities that you've spoken to about this, that might be helpful to get the juices flowing a little bit.
Good point. Very good idea. And thanks, Bill, for your comment in the chat. Clarity enforcement is certainly noted. Yeah. I'm trying to think. Who else do I know? I don't know. I was going to ask Stephanie, do you want to comment on what you think from the city of Fairfax, or maybe someone from Fredericksburg or Virginia Beach wants to chime in? Or Jake from Chesterfield? I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot. I'm just thinking who hasn't spoken lately and if anyone had a comment.
This is Stephanie Kupka. I don't have an opinion on this right now. I'd probably want to check with our leadership team and our city attorney to see what their thoughts would be, but I personally don't have an opinion either way.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Hey, Abby, it's Jake again. I know this was one of the items that caused Chesterfield some caution, I'll say, years ago, was the concern related to bond rating agencies from our budget department. So I echo kind of what Bill said, is the more risk we can remove from the locality, at least from a Chesterfield perspective, that's helpful in terms of marketing it to our powers that be.
Thanks, Jake. And it's interesting, the way that our agreements are structured, there is not, a bond impact and there is not a liability. But that being said, I still think that, local governments have expressed this concern, not just Chesterfield. So how we, if in fact we certainly probably want to keep the option in there, but how we state that option and how we indemnify a local government is probably going to be very important to even make sure it's ironclad, so to speak, hopefully. Is that something that you, Jake, didn't see from the documents you reviewed, or was it more of a conceptual or structural issue you saw more generally with
Yeah, I think on our end, it's more of the clarity item that Bill was referencing earlier as well. And pointing out, as was earlier mentioned, that nationwide, there's been very few of these instances anyway. And even in the program's history nationwide in the last 10 years, it is rare that this occurs, but as everybody on this call would agree, local governments have to be prepared for those small chances.
Absolutely, yeah. And you know, I would say the cases, which, you know, is more, there's not a central database that tells you that. It's from, you know, having that informational kind of flow through our national organization, and also just all of us program administrators, you know, talking to each other. That the costs of any kind of foreclosure action are borne by, not borne by the local government. And I would say, of course, because of the extended period of time in which it takes to enforce and get that payments back, you know, no one really wants to go down that route if they don't have to. So that it's not like we're like, yay, let's push it to the local government. It's like, no, how can we get the existing mortgage holder to make it whole, or, you know, the PACE lender defers for a number of years. You know, we saw through COVID that payments were late, and in a number of states in which we have, you know, friends who are administrators and also our capital provider partners, they just pushed it out, you know, waiting for things to stabilize, because it wasn't accelerated, it wasn't extinguished. So that was something that we did see. Let's see, Alicia, do you want to read that comment?
Yeah, I got it. Yep, from Alicia. Richmond would like more clarity regarding how the enforcement process works before providing an opinion, pros or cons, would be helpful.
Absolutely. That's certainly part of this process that we're going to be doing. So thank you for that, Alicia. I appreciate your perspective. And I think, you know, maybe that kind of leads into the next question about the best way to make the roles and responsibilities clear. On the call yesterday with the City of Richmond, there was a discussion of a very detailed kind of flow chart or process diagram or something like that. You know, we actually have like a kind of we do have different kind of process diagrams of the process, but making it very detailed and having maybe also, I've sent around to different localities, roles and responsibility kind of matrix. But is there anything that comes to mind that would wrap your head around how understanding what you'd have to do versus not, both in terms of approval and in the case of the waterfall, if, you know, something were to happen to the PACE lien being delinquent? Is there any just general visual or documentation that would be helpful to you all? Well,
Yeah,
I just
want to comment, and that is, you know, this may be something that's a little bit particular to each jurisdiction, because if a property goes default on their CPACE lien, they're probably default in their taxes as well. And the idea with the lien, the CPACE lien, is that it follows the same process as a default tax. And so, you know, what that structure looks like may be a little different jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I know I used to work in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is a commonwealth, and we have what we call home rule charter. And so, you know, each county can have its own government in a sense. And so the process was definitely different county to county a little bit. So a little bit, you know, a lot of it is in the state statute on what the delinquency process looks like for tax collection, but it did vary. And so I just want to kind of throw that out there, that really the enforcement is supposed to look like and act like a delinquent tax enforcement. And that may be a little different in each jurisdiction.
It is true that cities and counties have different periods of time in which you can enforce. Some are longer than others. Some of them allow for it to be kind of accelerated to like a whole property tax sale. So it does vary. I guess maybe I rephrased it a little too specifically to just saying, you know, understanding the whole process by which what we would do as the state entity and what local government would do. But you're completely right that there are variations. We have elected treasurers in many of our jurisdictions, so that automatically changes potentially how it would go. I think Andy made that point in our last call. last week about that. Andy, do you have any comments you want to make? As he's been working with us on outreach, but he's had many years of experience at the City of Virginia Beach.
Thanks, Abby. Not a detailed comment, but I think the last point made was that there could be a real difference between the city's approach to enforcement if the person were also behind on their taxes, their city taxes. But I think what you said about getting a flow chart together, that cities could then, everyone could see who's going to do what in case this happens with, you know, the option A or option B, depending on the circumstances. Something I'm going to be working on, as you asked me to see how at least our city would, the Virginia Beach city would approach it, and then we can probably show it to others and see if we can get a uniform, you know, flow chart, because treasurers have discretion about time, but yeah, there may be options. You know, the first option in any kind of default is a collection option. It's not foreclosure. And so there's that thing to consider too. The treasurer can initiate a collection action even if the capital provider has been unsuccessful in their collection. So that would be part of the process we'd have to put in there too.
Thanks a lot. That's really helpful. And I think this is a big conversation point, and obviously not going to be addressed in this one Zoom workshop, but we will be back in touch with those who participated to get feedback. So I appreciate that comment. So we don't have that much time left. If it's okay with all of you, we're going to move to just some other questions, and maybe we can just hopefully keep them brief for the first question, yes, no, but I'm going to have to pass this over to my colleague Ellen to read this out.
Thanks, Nakia, and thanks, Abby. So program agreement approach, the first question. There are two major types of program agreements. Let me put my camera back on, I'm sorry. There are two major types of program agreements that we included in your background folder. One that anticipates a shorter tri-party agreement and separate bilateral financing agreement, Loudoun County example, and one where all terms and conditions are in one agreement, City of Roanoke. Do you have a preference? And if so, why?
This is Bill Egger, City of Alexandria. We've opted for the Loudoun County approach largely because we don't see a role for the city to be heavily involved in negotiation of financing terms between the project owner and the capital provider. But we do see having the opportunity to step in. I mean, I think the tri-party agreement allows for just overall agreement to the terms of the program and how we each act and operate and kind of delegate authorities. So again, it's just to say that we don't see a role for being involved in the financing agreement necessarily, and so we've elected to separate the two.
Yeah, and I feel like this is, welcome other comments on this. There was quite a bit of consensus around this. We got really good input on this in the legal session. So defer to you, VPA team, but if there's another question of these other ones that you'd like to get to, you know, I think I'd be happy to move to that.
A good idea. Go ahead, Alan.
Okay. Would you support having additional parameters, for example, LTV or term, around CPACE financing above what is required in the state statute? If yes, would you support having these parameters included in the ordinance or in the program guide? It should be noted that every time the statute is changed, a corresponding change in the local ordinance is necessary for the change to take effect.
Abby, I'll just talk about that one a little bit. I mean, you know, currently the guidelines say you have to be better than the current building code in Virginia, which is a really great standard, especially since you have a pretty modern building code in Virginia. In Pennsylvania, they have an older building code, and their requirement is 20% better than building code, but they're using an older standard. So I just and the statute says you have to do a project that saves energy. So, the statute doesn't say how much or how it's calculated or what it is in reference to the current energy standard in the building code. So, as you talk about the Virginia program, how far beyond, what are the ambitions, and are they codified in local regulation and in local ordinance, I think is an important and interesting question. Wisconsin statute has an LTV requirement. We can't exceed 95% of the value of the property in debt. That has to be a combination of the mortgage and the CPACE loan. Can't exceed 95% of the appraised value. I feel like, that's a bumper on the Wisconsin program, and it's not terribly restrictive, but it is in the state statute. So, what are the hard rules and where are they documented? Just in the program guidelines, which can be amended and adjusted as the program grows, or are those requirements and parameters outlined in ordinances or statute that then need to be amended and changed as the program grows or the goals change? So I just wanted to throw out like a couple examples to kind of get people's brains around what this might mean in Virginia.
And let me just add, I agree with that entirely, that most state statutes have some kind of, bumpers, as you called it. I'm not necessarily saying that's a good thing to have them in the statute, but in a way, as you point out, I can speak from experience, this will be the 5th time amending the state statute to broaden it. So, if we're a Dillon rule state, so we don't have home rule at all. So that means like anytime you want to do anything, it's got to be in the state statute. So if we do decide to put something in the state statute, that is golden, and nothing can really, change from that. So that's how we had a resiliency, refinancing, all these other kinds of, having this opt-in option, all this had to be at the state level. So I think it's just something to think about, and we can certainly be in touch later about the implications, but certainly there is if Virginia Energy is running the program, it's in the program guide, this Virginia Energy making more of those decisions, and if it's something that you agree to in an ordinance where the local government says, yeah, we're comfortable with this, versus a statute where you have to go back to General Assembly and hope you get it passed. So.
Well, we're here in the last few minutes. I'm sure everybody has an 11:30. So I think maybe we should just go right to the last question, which I know is very broad, see if there are any final comments, and then I'll breeze through the next steps in the last minute. Does that sound okay?
That sounds great. Ellen?
So am I reading the Virginia one, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, can you go back, Nakia? Virginia is one of the more flexible states in terms of eligibility from both a statutory and VPA program perspective. Do you have any general comments about our state and your interest in participating in the Virginia CPACE program?
So basically anything else we should be thinking about as we digest everything you've already provided us with today?
This is Bill Eggert. One thought that comes to mind, this is actually building on a previous question, is we track liens over time or projects over time. There was a discussion about, metrics, et cetera. I can foresee a circumstance, say 10 years down the line, where, our prior Treasury lead or whomever has moved on, and we just need to reference back to what liens have been issued, or just kind of what the history of projects and basically what has taken place. I just think that if there's a repository that can be created to help localities track over time the activity and provide as a reference for any of the projects or liens that have been issued, that would be helpful. I mean, I think we would rely on our local systems to track that as well, but as a backup, it might be helpful to have that available by the state.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great comment.
Great. Well, let's go to the next slide. Make sure we get everybody out of here on time. Next steps. So we, like I said at the very beginning, this is the third out of 4 workshops that we're having. The last one is next week, and that one's going to dive into equity considerations. So really how we can best use this statewide CPACE program to further equity and environmental justice goals that we have at the statewide level, as well as that you have at the local level. So if you haven't received an invitation to that, then please just let me know, and I'm happy to forward that to you. We are hoping to roll out this statewide program as soon as possible, hopefully in Q2, following our digesting of all of this and finalizing of the program documents. I think another next step that isn't on here is the development of that flow chart that was brought up. That's such a good idea. And certainly we will be sending out the near final program documents for review, along with the flow chart that reflects the program documents, so that you all on the local level can point out any legal or practical concerns that you might have before we really finalize everything. Abby, do you want to say anything about PACEFI?
Just that if you wanted to test it, it's pacefy.com. It basically is our new portal we got through our WISE challenge that allows you to put in an address, see if it's eligible in your locality. So you have to use localities that are on our website currently under locations to do that. And then it would basically look to play, you put a few example improvements, and then you can see what lending interest there is. And we're still ramping up, but it's a way, we're really looking at a way to address the small market. So if you feel like seeing that, how that works, it's a pretty quick process, and appreciate any feedback. Thanks a lot for that, Bettina.
Yeah, sure. Alice, close us out.
Yes, thanks so much. This was so helpful. Just quickly, is there an opportunity to use federal funds for PACE projects?
Meaning as a capital provider, money as versus
yeah, if the Virginia Department of Energy, I'm thinking about all the critical infrastructure bills and acts and package funding opportunities that are out there. So if the Virginia Department of Energy, I'm not really certain, it's just a general question, but are there funds that go to state agencies, and then are there opportunities with those funds to fund PACE programs? I'm not really certain. I'm just asking. I'm a former Department of Energy employee, so I'm always looking for money. So I'm thinking in this case, there's a lot of funds floating around out there. Is there any way that it can, PACE can be connected to those funds? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Line, right?
Yeah, good one to end on. I will say I am thinking a lot about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the funding coming through that. Of course, in figuring out where we direct those funds, there is always an opportunity cost that, for a lot of the provisions, it is not quite as much money as ARA or some of the packages that we've seen in the past. So we are going to try to, find the most effective use of those funds. So that would be the fact that there are private capital providers that do want to finance these projects and they're out there would maybe be the reason why I would lean toward not directing those federal funds, just to not crowd out private sector capital as much as possible. But it's certainly something that I'll be thinking about.
All right, perfect. Well,
one last thing, Don, I want to say, Alice, is that you can look at Minnesota's program, Pete Klein. He used ARA money, which was more, I think Bettina, I totally agree with Bettina, but he was able to create a revolving loan fund for his PACE program from some money at the federal level. So that's something but it was very specific how he did it and how he does it. So I don't know if this is even applicable now, but it can happen. It's just not common. So,
All right, thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you again, everyone. Sorry I went over a few minutes, but again, the recording is going to be available on VPA's website. Let me know if you want to attend the equity session next week, and we will certainly be in touch.